Today we are talking about books I've DNF'd, and there are quite a few. I always tried my hardest not to DNF books because I felt like however much time I've already invested in that book will be wasted if I end up DNFing it. But that is not true. If you continue reading a book you clearly dislike, you're gonna waste so much more time. So just put it down whenever you realize it's not for you. I'm gonna put down every single book that hasn't convinced me in the first 50 pages, let's say. It doesn't need to blow my mind, but if I'm not interested in the characters, then what's the point? So I thought I'd talk about the books I DNF'd and why I didn't like them, because if you have a similar taste to me, maybe you won't end up losing your time picking a book you won't like. So let's get into it. I've talked about this book before and how much I hate it, but How My Neighbor Stole Christmas, this just left a dent into my soul, a very full of hatred dent and full of frustration, okay? And I need to talk about it again because I DNF'd it probably, I don't know, 60 pages in, and I had a bubbling fury around me when I did. No book has ever made me more mad than this one right here. It's about this girl who has to return to her childhood town to take care of her aunt that had some health issues. But she turns out to be the self-absorbed bitch that doesn't appreciate anyone around her. She makes jokes all the time, which is fine, but she just keeps whining about how hard it is for her through jokes, and her poor sister has to literally take everything upon herself because the FMC, Story is her name, or Story, she cannot be trusted to do anything. And the sister is a nurse. She doesn't have free time, she's overworked and tired, and she takes over caring for their aunt, even though Story was the one to do it. And she just kept whining. I don't know, oh my god, she was so unlikable. I'm happy I DNF'd this book because I found out that later into the story, the MMC sticks a candy cane where candy canes should never go, if you know what I mean. So, you know, I dodged the bullet right there by DNFing this. The next one is The Ministry of Time, and I know a lot of people love this book, but I just couldn't connect to it. However much I tried, I just didn't feel it. It started as this very interesting time travel romance, and I was intrigued in the first chapter. I literally expected it to be a 5-star read, but then I started to notice the vocabulary being very clunky and heavy for no reason, and I couldn't really relate to the FMC at all. There was no melody to the writing structure, if that makes any sense. Let's say I could have gotten over the vocabulary thing if the two elements for which I picked up the book were present, but the time travel part and the romance part were not really there. We had a few cute funny moments between the girl and the guy, but that was mainly it. And when it comes to the time travel element, we didn't really understand how that worked, why it worked, it is just there. What we know is that personalities from the past were plucked out of their timeline before their death and brought to the present time to, you know, integrate into society. And then we have the bridge, who is the person to take care of them and integrate them in this you know, in present time. The FMC is the bridge, and the MMC is a commander named Graham or something like that. I expected a more fast-paced rhythm and more action, but up until 30% into the book, not much has happened. So that's when I actually DNF'd it. Another book I DNF'd is The Ashes in the Star-Cursed King, which is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This book I loved. I devoured it. We had sexy vampires entering a deadly trial, they fall in love, but then they betray each other, and they are in rival clans, and I was hooked. But at the very end of this book, the MMC does something unredeemable. He was a literal piece of shit in the end, right? And I expected this to solve the issue and make me like the MMC again, but it did not do that. Rain, the MMC, I just couldn't care less about him. He was an asshole, and I didn't want him to be with Araya again. The first 100 pages, because that's the point where I DNF'd it, they were slow. Not much happened. We did have a tension between them, but I didn't want them to end up together again. So I DNF'd it, and I don't think I'm gonna pick it up again. I don't know, it's just so far away from me right now, so no. We all probably heard about Animal Farm by George Orwell. I was supposed to read it in high school for my history class. I did not do that, but I did pick it up as an adult a few years ago. And even though I do understand its value and how important it is for us to understand how communism works and, you know, the regime and how this book presented how communism would impact the world before it happened, that is of great value. But me reading it and enjoying it apart from this valuable meaning behind the book, I didn't really like it. Like, I appreciate, you know, the educational perspective of this book, but it being engaging and catching my attention, that did not happen with this book. I almost finished it. I DNF'd it probably 10 pages before the end, but I just didn't really care. I sort of knew what was happening from my history class, but no, it was just not for me. Even though it is a good book, I didn't like it. The next two books are written by Haruki Murakami, and my boyfriend enjoys his stories because he finds them very relaxing and linear and, you know, easy to read, laid back. He likes them a lot, and I do not like them at all. Murakami's writing style, like literally how the sentences work together and the rhythm and cadence of his writing, that's not an issue. He writes his books very well in that sense. But those damn stories and the plot and the characters, it makes no sense. It feels like he literally writes down whatever pops into his mind. The weirder it is, the better. I feel like that's his motto. It feels like following a road just to end up nowhere. Things happen, yeah, for sure, but the characters just go on with their lives and they do not really make decisions. They just rather go with whatever happens to them, and you are just going along with them for the ride. The two books I picked up from his library written by Haruki Murakami are Norwegian Wood and Dance Dance Dance. And let's talk about this one first. This book follows, I think I remember correctly, a journalist, a really lonely guy that in hindsight is thinking about one of his ex-girlfriends from a really long time ago, and that leads him to the Dolphin Hotel, which is a quite weird place, and at a certain floor something really weird happens, like supernatural weird stuff, very surreal vibes. From that point on, I read half of it and nothing really happened. Like, that's the setting, that's everything that happened. We get a glimpse into his mind and how he thinks. He's confused about this hotel and he talks to this other girl about it, and that's it. And from what I'm understanding, in the end, the reason of why this weird thing happens in the hotel is not solved, so we do not know why it happened. At first, the premise sounded interesting, but the vibes were a bit off for me. I didn't like the way it made me feel, so no. I didn't like this one. And this one, Norwegian Wood, I picked up more recently. And let me tell you, reading this made me realize that I should not pick up another Haruki Murakami book because it's just not for me. I read about 70% of this book, and again, I got weird vibes, and I just wanted to put it down and get into something that makes me feel better. A fever dream, that's how this book feels for me. There's this artificial nostalgia about the book, and I'm looking through a blurred lens, literally that's the feeling I get, to characters that do not really make decisions about their lives, and it's like a really weird foggy autumn, but not in a good sense. This follows a boy whose best friend dies, and he ends up bonding with his best friend's girlfriend, and they fall in love. We follow him through university, I think. He meets this other girl, just his life, and however he decides to live it. But at some point, we end up following this 40-year-old woman that got tricked by a 13-year-old into having sex, and she feels like she's been abused, even though that girl was a literal 13-year-old, but she was this psychopath with no feelings that tricked the old woman. You get what I mean? Like, it's just not it. Just really weird vibes. And Haruki Murakami seems to love making his female characters pick-me type girls, but at the same time very aloof. He gives them this mysterious, mature energy, and it doesn't really fit with a 15-year-old, especially in their situation. Also, the way he describes any sexual encounter makes me physically cringe. So I know a lot of people love his books. That's completely valid. You know, he is a good writer. It's just what he writes about is not something I want to read, you know? So no. Next we have Dune. So I watched the movie first a long time ago and I absolutely loved it. Then I gave the second movie a try when it came out and it was just not for me. I stopped watching it halfway through because it just was kind of weird. And when I picked up this book, I expected, you know, a science fiction vibe, which this is a science fiction book, but it didn't have the vibe I was looking for. It felt a little bit slow. I didn't know what was going to happen, so maybe that made it a bit boring too. It felt way too political. Even though I like political intrigue, this was not something that resonated with me. Maybe I love political intrigue with a sense of adventure, so that might be a reason, but I don't know. So yeah, I didn't really like Dune. The Count of Monte Cristo. Now, I really regret DNFing this book because this is one of the first classics that I really enjoyed. It started out with a normal pace, you know, it was intriguing, I was curious, but I absolutely adored the prison escape arc. Oh my god, I was glued to the book. I love reading about things like that, and at that point, I needed to know what was going to happen in the book. So I went on reading, but after he escapes prison, the pace slows down so damn much. I kept picking up the book up until I didn't do it anymore. Maybe if it was like 200 pages shorter, maybe that would have made me follow through with reading the whole book. But still, I feel like this is such a good book for anyone who wants to get into classics and feels like they can handle a really, really big book. 'Tis the season for revenge. Long story short, we have this girl who's been treated like shit by her boyfriend, and after he dumps her, she decides to get her revenge. So she hooks up with his boss. It started out decently, nothing extraordinary, but a relaxed read. I was enjoying reading it up until the first spicy scene. It was so damn unrealistic because they met up through an app, right? So they barely knew each other. That's not the issue. The issue is after dinner, they went to his place. And then he was so possessive and weird about the whole thing. He loves her now or is like really infatuated and cannot continue without her, and very graphic in the language. Just not for me. No, I DNF'd it about 35% in or something like that. The Pumpkin Spice Cafe is this really sweet small town romance. Okay, we have a girl that goes back to her childhood town after a traumatic event, and there she meets the guy, you know, jack of all trades, everyone loves him, and they fall in love. Very generic, very simple. That's the problem, it was way too simple. And the characters were kind of flat, nothing really happened. I could predict everything that was going to happen. Nothing wrong about it, but I wouldn't say there was anything really good about it either. It was just boring, but I do understand how this could feel very comforting if you are looking for something very relaxed. Also, this is very spicy later on into the book, so I don't know. If you're looking for that vibe, you might like this. A lot of people enjoy reading this book. Sabotage by Chantal Tessier, and I feel like I need to just tell you the first scene for you to understand why I DNF'd it. It starts with a literal gangbang. Her stepbrother is one of the guys and he films her, posts her on the internet. The video reaches 10 million views and she decides to destroy his car and then proceeds to bang him again. So I don't know what's the logic behind her actions, but I really did not resonate with this girl. I didn't like it. Extremely spicy, but you know, when you're picking up a Chantal Tessier book, that's what you expect. So if you want a really smutty book with questionable interactions and decisions, you might like this, but I needed to put the book down, go touch some grass, and never touch a Chantal Tessier book again. At least that's my experience. Winter in Sakucha is another book I DNF'd. Or rather, I wouldn't say DNF'd it because I literally skimmed through the last 2 chapters or so. So technically I did finish it, but I really didn't want to. Honestly, I should have DNF'd it. It is a short book, but in that short book, I felt like I read for years. It just nothing happened. It gives off a similar vibe to Haruki Murakami, but it's not as weird. We have this woman that works in a shop and has a really bad relationship with her mother, and then she meets a French guy that is also a cartoonist, and they go see a museum, I think, I'm not sure, and that's basically what happens. Before the coffee gets cold, same thing. I basically read the book, but I wished I DNF'd it. This is not as bad. I enjoyed going through the book. It's about this coffee shop that transports you back in time or in the future? I'm not really sure. Whatever. For only 5 minutes until your coffee gets cold. If your coffee gets cold, you become this sort of ghost. That's basically the plot, and we follow the staff of the coffee shop and a few other characters. It had some emotionally charged scenes. We followed through these people's lives, and it was a decent read. I don't regret reading it that much, but if I were to have it in front of my face for the first time again, I wouldn't pick it up because it didn't really give me anything. I feel like I was just indifferent to this book. Den of Vipers. God, this book was something else. We have Roxy, a pub owner that somehow, even though she is a petite woman, she ends up being able to beat up five really strong and muscular men. She beats them up and then they kidnap her and force her to live with them. That's what happens. And then she proceeds to, you know, have sexual relationships with every single one of them. Now, I think I should have known that this book was not for me because I really dislike the why choose trope. So yeah. No, I do not like this book. But if you want a very smutty book with, again, questionable MMCs, might be an option. I think I DNF'd it 40% into it, and I picked it up for a YouTube video, and I disliked it so much that I didn't make the YouTube video in the end, so. Spring Snow by Yukio Mishima is a book I gave 2 chances. Both times I DNF'd it around the same page count. It's a historical, tragic love story between the son of a wealthy nobleman and the daughter of an aristocrat family. They were close as kids, but then as adults, he is quite distant to her until he realizes he actually cares for her. But when he realizes his feelings, it's too late because she's already engaged, and that's when they start an affair. After the affair, I DNF'd it. It was full of description. It's basically pages over pages of description. The vibe wasn't really my cup of tea. The characters were making decisions I would never make, and their thinking patterns and however they decide to move forward and deal with the situation felt really unrealistic, but at the same time, we are talking about 1920s Japan, so maybe I just do not relate to the mindset of that period. Fairy Tales from the Underworld by Elsie Moon. I DNF'd this book 125 pages in because there were 2 specific scenes that didn't really resonate with me. We have a girl that is tricked into being kidnapped by the mafia boss because her brother did some stupid shit and messed with the mafia gang, basically, and they want to get to her brother through her. But the mafia boss ends up falling in love with her or something like that. One thing that threw me off was that in the beginning he offers her a Diet Coke and he goes something like, look, here's a Diet Coke because I know all girls love Diet Cokes. And she was like, yeah, he's right. First and foremost, Diet Coke tastes like shit, okay? I would much rather prefer a lemonade or something like that. So I don't know which girls we are talking about, but not all girls like Diet Coke, okay? Okay. And the other thing was that he basically calls a hooker at some point, and he calls her pet, and she calls him master, and it's kind of weird. I didn't really want to finish the book, so yeah, I DNF'd. I am pretty sure I DNF'd many more books, but I can't seem to think of any others, so this was the video. Remember that if you ever feel like you have to read a book and you do not want to DNF it because you paid for it and because you wasted time, just remember that Aimee told you it is okay to DNF that freaking book, okay? Okay. Let's enjoy the books we are reading, okay? Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.